I'm Jenny Taylor, and my husband Jim and I train Morgan show horses at our facility in Medina, Ohio.
For the third year in a row in
I was a typical horse crazy kid. My dad took me for riding lessons at the local barn, which was a hunter jumper barn. So those were the lessons I was taking, and the first horse he bought me, I was 9 years old, and it was a Morgan. And so he sent it to the jumper trainer at that barn. So I was riding, I rode him. He was 14 hands, so he was an open jumping pony, and we did really well. And we loved it. So my second horse he bought me was also a Morgan, young horse, and sent it to the jumper trainer, and he totally flunked him and said he was horrible and he couldn't jump at all, and to just take him home. So he was a stud colt, and we didn't really have a place we could take him home to, so we sent him to another local saddlebred trainer and just said, see what he is. We don't know, we don't even know. We have jumpers, he won't jump. And it was George Knight. And that horse ended up about 6 months later, he won the 3-year-old park harness class at the Morgan Gold Cup. And he was my first park horse. He was a stallion, I was 13, so I showed him open. And that's how, and we switched over. So that's how if he had jumped, I maybe still had been on jumpers, but he wouldn't. His name was Willamore Spitfire, and he was a really good horse. Well, my most memorable are probably the 3 open park saddle stakes that I won here, for all different reasons. The first one was with Firewind Diva, who when we came here with her as a 6-year-old, she had never been beaten. She was undefeated, and she had always been unanimous. From 3-year-old park saddle and her world championship here, and her 4-year-old year all year, and her championship here, and her 5-year-old year, she was undefeated and unanimous, and I won the ladies park saddle here. 6-year-old she'd won, and we came here to show open that year to do something different. So when I showed in the first class, she wasn't quite at the top of her game, and she got beat. She was second. And her card was a 1-2-5. There were only 5 in there. So one of them tied her last. So we had 3 days to try to figure out how to come back and what we needed to do. So my husband's job was, he worked her. So his job was to get her back to the top of her game, which I knew was no problem. But my thoughts were that I just needed to devastate them and get the judge that had me second up to first, and I didn't know what to do with the 5th. So all my friends were running around going, why did he ever last? One of them asked him, and he said, I just have never liked her, which is a good answer, but I didn't know how I was going to fix that. There was probably no way. So I thought, well, maybe I can drag him to 3rd. So when I went down the chute, about 3 steps into the ring, my whole strategy had to go because she was wild as a buck. And the whole time I just had to try to keep her at her feet. But she made a really great show, and she won. And her votes were 1-1-2. So that was my first one. And then with Picasso, who was her son, his class was exciting to me because he was kind of following her in her footsteps. As a 3-year-old, he won everything and won out here. As a 4-year-old, he won everything and won his qualifier here, but was reserve in the stake. As a 5-year-old, he won everything and won the amateur out here. So, coming as a 6-year-old, I was going to show open. So, I won the qualifier. And he was really good. When we came back in the stake, there were 5 horses again. And I thought I had a good go. We stripped, and they called for a workout and sent all 5 back out. Well, at that point, I thought you think of 2 things. First of all, I wasn't good enough in the first part of the class. And the second thing was you've got about 2 trips each way of the ring to make this happen. So, I just really dug it, and he was really good for me, and he won. And then the next one was Trilogy. And my work with him was, he'd already been here twice with two different really good horse trainers. He'd been not ridden, he'd been off for 2 years. He was 11 years old. And when John called me and asked me if I'd take him, I said absolutely. But he was a different horse. That he was not my style really, and he wanted to be kind of slow and beautiful and high, and I kind of always have a chargy horse that wants to go a lot. So I felt like we had to get together, and we struggled, getting together all year. And when we qualified, we showed one time and qualified, and he was okay. But I didn't have everybody running around saying she's going to win the Park Saddle Stake. So about 30 days before this horse show, he really started to come with me, and when we got here, he worked great. So those were my 3 most memorable. I try to practice every scenario. First of all, I think the horses have to be really fit, and I really work on that part of it, because a lot of horses end up, I think, fading at the end, and I never want mine to do that. And I try to practice all the scenarios, on the rail, off the rail. I try to figure out where they're comfortable, how much I can push them, how much I don't. I just practice a lot of that stuff. And like I said, I really try to get that when I push their buttons, they do it, they trust me, I know them, they know me. That's not an excuse if we don't do well. That's not one of the things that's not there. I have a goal. I want to entertain the crowd, number one. I love my horses to be on the edge exciting, but do the required gaits. So my goal is to go in there and show and be good the whole time. I've shown enough to know that I can't plan what's going to happen in there, because usually it changes. They change. They're different than the last time I showed them. But I have an overall plan, but not very specific usually. I pretty much ride the class in front of me. Like I said, I'll have a plan of how I want to enter, or what his speed needs to be, or if he can stay off the rail and be good. But once I get in there, I have to kind of, go with the flow and figure it out. Yeah, and that's what makes it fun. It makes it interesting to, try to be as good as you can be when there's all kinds of things going on around you. I've had some horses, like Diva, I couldn't ride her off the rail at all. She just could not contain herself. She would leap and break, and so I had to stay right on the rail and just go around people and get back. But I love to be off if they'll get out there and be confident and show. I try to practice that at home, because that's my favorite. Well, my husband, he'd say, Jenny, just go for it. Just ride the socks off that thing. And right then, that just gives me my direction right before I go in. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. I'm going to do that. I'm going for it. Most of my amateurs come and practice a lot. And so we kind of do the same thing. We try to recreate, ring situations. But I pretty much tell them that for me, I just want them to I want their horses to look good. I want them to have a good ride. Mistakes do not bother me. I tell them, mistakes are going to happen. And what I really want is that if you make a mistake and you don't win and you come out with a lower ribbon, I want the judge to say, that was the best horse in there. He looked really great, but he made some mistakes, and I'll look at him when he comes back. And because I think people get afraid to make mistakes, and they get nervous about that part. So that's mainly what I tell them. It's not, we have a lot of fun. We're not too complicated.